What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. Welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So today, we are going to talk about the New York Knicks, continuing along with our offseason breakdown series. The Knicks, by all accounts, had a very, very successful season. They were a team that was projected by many to be one of the worst teams in the league, and all of a sudden, they make the playoffs, and then, they lose in the first round in 5 games to the Hawks. But that loss looks a little bit better now, considering how good the Hawks turned out to be in their run to the Eastern Conference Finals. So, yeah, you lose to a good team, but just making the playoffs, I think, was a great success for the New York Knicks this season, and they've got a lot to build on because they've identified some players who are going to be around for the long haul with this team. They've got some assets to potentially make some moves. They've got cap space, and finally, after a very long rebuild, it looks like this team is trending in a positive direction. So right off the bat, let's talk about their huge amount of cap space. They only have $54 million committed in payroll for next season. Now, there are quite a few free agents, as you might expect if the payroll is that low. There's going to be guys that they're wanting to bring back. But if any of the top free agents on the market want to go to New York, they're going to have the cap space in order to do it. And because they have sort of raised their reputation around the league, having such a successful season this past year, Tom Thibodeau winning Coach of the Year, and them kind of putting together a competent roster finally, their reputation has gone up, and now the lure to go play in New York might be a little bit greater for some of these top free agents. So Kawhi Leonard is a free agent. He might miss most of the upcoming season, and most people expect him back with the Clippers anyway, but he is the top guy on the market, so maybe there's something you can do there, but I highly doubt that one. Kyle Lowry could be in play, maybe Mike Conley, DeMar DeRozan, any of those top guys could potentially be in play for the New York Knicks because they do have, pretty much the most cap space out of anybody. They're going to have a max slot. Even after bringing back a lot of their guys, I would assume they would still have close to max money. So if you want to bring in a guy like DeRozan or Lowry or Oladipo even, although I don't know if I would take the gamble on him, but there are some players out there, and the Knicks are going to be in play for a lot of the top free agents this summer, which is good because it's been a long time since they've been a free agent destination, and even though this year's class is not the best, they can still add some pretty decent talent to this roster. So here's the cap sheet. We have Julius Randle on a non-guaranteed deal for next season. Fully expect them to guarantee that deal. Julius Randle was All-NBA this season. He was amazing. Came out of nowhere, really. A lot of people thought that he might end up getting traded or cut or something, but he clearly showed his value of that contract. He was clearly worth that money this year, playing himself into probably a max contract the next time he's in free agency next summer. So maybe there's an extension for him if the Knicks want to just extend him now and not have to worry about it later, but I would expect him to stick around with this team for a little while because he has played himself into All-Star and All-NBA status, so good for him for finally unlocking something in his game at 26 years old. He's made some real improvements over the last year. So Julius Randle has played himself into being a core of this team. I don't care how bad he was in the playoffs. I'm not worried about that. I think it was just some cold shooting and a bad stretch, and the Hawks defended him well there. So a lot of people are gonna look at that and say, oh, this guy shouldn't be getting paid max money. I disagree. I think that this season he played himself into that, and even though he wasn't great in the playoffs, he still is deserving of being an all-star and a cornerstone of this team moving forward. And then beyond him, nobody's making really any money next year. There's no crazy contracts on this team. Nobody's getting paid, and so that's why they have this big cap space here. RJ Barrett is their next highest paid guy, and he's still on his rookie deal. So he's only making $8.5 million for next season. I fully expect him back as well entering his third year. RJ Barrett made a lot of improvements in his sophomore year, and I expect that he will continue to get better. He's a guy who had a lot of promise in the draft. Took him a little while. His rookie season was not great, especially if you compare him to the 2 guys who were drafted ahead of him, and that's kind of going to be the natural comparison, right? Zion Williamson and Ja Morant, both of whom have become all-star level players right away. RJ Barrett's taken him a little bit of time, but I think he's on a trajectory as to where he'll be competing for all-star games in the near future, and even if he's not becoming an all-star, I think he can be a very effective NBA player for a very long time. So I like RJ Barrett. I think he's growing as a player, and New York's a good spot for him because he doesn't have to be the lead guy right now. That's Julius Randle, and it was Derrick Rose for them last year. So while RJ Barrett played a nice role, he doesn't necessarily have to have the spot on him and all this pressure all the time. So I liked what he did for them last season, and I expect that he will be back. Beyond him, a lot of free agents down here, most of them veterans. You do have one younger guy. That is Derrick Rose, Frank Ntilikina, Alec Burks, Elfrid Payton, Nerlens Noel, Reggie Bullock, and Taj Gibson, all entering free agency this summer. Let's go through these guys one by one. So Rose is the guy who is probably the highest priority to bring back. He was brought in a trade midseason. He's, back with the Knicks. Derrick Rose showed that he can still play. I mean, he's had sort of a resurgence to his career over the past couple of seasons, right? He's not going to be anywhere near his MVP form, right? He's never going to be back to those heights. But Derrick Rose is still a good, effective NBA player. He can score with the best of them, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. He's a bucket getter, and he's, the shot has improved since he was, he's a better three-point shooter now than he was 10 years ago when he was winning the MVP, right? And he's, been able to score in a variety of ways. He's getting better as a distributor. And Derrick Rose is just a good piece on a winning team. And so I think that he should be a high priority for them to bring back. He might get himself paid, get himself a nice little contract, one more nice contract for him before he really starts to get older, a 2 or 3 year deal for about $10 to $12 million per season, maybe a little bit more than that. Who knows what the market's going to be like for him, but Derrick Rose is a good player, and I'm hoping that the Knicks bring him back because it is a good fit for both sides there. Frank Ntilikina is going to be restricted this summer. He has been not great so far in his NBA career, looking like he was a little bit overdrafted. He's good defensively, but other than that, not much for him. A lot of people still believe in his promise. He's only 22, so he's got, a lot of improvements left to do, and I'm expecting that he will get better over the next couple of seasons. Do the Knicks want to take a chance on bringing him back? What will the paycheck be? Will it be just like a short deal, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal type prove it thing? Or maybe another team feels like they want to gamble on his upside. I really don't know for Frank Ntilikina. I still like him. I think he does have some upside. I don't think he's, you should not write him off as a complete draft bust right now. I do still think that there's something there for him, especially given his defensive ability. And if he can ever just get the shot a little bit more consistent and take care of the ball a little bit better, I think that he would start to see a little bit, a resurgence in his career. So I would hope that the Knicks bring him back as well. I think that he has a little potential left, and for a team like this, they can really afford to do it. But I'm not sure. I'm kind of 50-50 on whether they will or not, just because he has not been great in his 4 years in the NBA so far, and you're usually not afforded that much time in order to get things right, whether that's fair or not. Alec Burks was really important for them, on that $6 million deal, 1 year deal. He had a great season with New York. He was, very important for them as their designated sixth-man bucket getter. Him and Derrick Rose kind of both filled a similar role on this team, but both of them were effective. Alec Burks, came up clutch down the stretch in a lot of games. When he was injured, they clearly missed him. He had to miss some time here and there, and it was, it was clear that they kind of needed him out there this season. So I would expect them to try to bring him back. He's only 29 years old, so he's probably got a while left of being productive and playing at this level. He's clearly proven that he belongs in the NBA. He's going to get himself a little a payday this offseason, I think. Whether he's looking for another bigger 1 year deal or maybe some more long-term security, but I think he's more than a minimum guy. He's going to be like a mid-level exception type player. Whether that's with New York or maybe he wants to go try to win a ring somewhere and play on a mid-level exception for a better team. I have no idea what he wants to do, but if I'm the Knicks, I try to bring him back, him as well as Derrick Rose. I think those are going to be your two probably highest priorities in free agency. There's a couple of other good players on this roster as well that are free agents, but I think those two might be the most important. Elfrid Payton, I would let him walk. He, Tom Thibodeau loved to give him minutes when he probably wasn't deserving of them. He just wasn't that good this season. Knicks fans know. Knicks fans hate Elfrid Payton. They just, every time he was on the floor, he just wasn't being effective. You'd rather give the minutes to Quickly or Burks or Rose or somebody else. But Elfrid Payton started for a lot of the season when he probably shouldn't have, and I would just let him walk in free agency. I see no reason to bring him back whatsoever. Nerlens Noel, I think, is also important for them to bring back. He was very effective as the center for them. I thought he was good defensively. He was catching a lot of lobs and doing his damage inside. There's a reason that he was, so highly regarded as a prospect in the draft, and had a couple of rough years here and there, bounced around to a couple of teams, but he's been pretty effective as a role player for the past couple of seasons, and I like Nerlens Noel. I think that there's going to be a lot of teams out there that are going to want to give him some money, and so if the Knicks want to bring him back, I'm all for it. I think him, along with Burks and Rose, I would probably put Noel in that category as well. Maybe not quite as high of a priority as those two, but I do like him as a player, and I think the Knicks should probably try to bring him back. And like I said, they're going to have the cap space, so if they don't convince any of the top free agents to come in and eat up that space, then the money's just got to go to their free agents that are already here. So Noel could be set up to get a nice payday from them, or maybe latch on somewhere else for a mid-level or a little bit more than that. We will see on Nerlens Noel, but he to me is also going to be a high priority for them to bring back this offseason as well. Some other younger guys here, Obi Toppin and Kevin Knox, both still on rookie contracts. Knox will be eligible for an extension, although I highly doubt they'll give it to him. I think it's more likely that he's traded, to be honest with you. He is the piece that they would throw into a trade. If they were trading for a player that had some value but not a ton, you say, okay, here's Kevin Knox, and he might still have some potential left entering the final season of his rookie contract. He's not a huge financial commitment for any team wanting to take him on, kind of just a prove-it type player. Maybe he would do better in a different scenario, but he hasn't really panned out in his first couple of years. So I think Knox is a likely trade guy, or if he does come back, I doubt it's on an extension. Maybe they wait until next offseason when he's restricted and try to re-sign him then, but I don't anticipate any move in order to extend Kevin Knox if there's going to be a trade, if anything. Obi Toppin also, he could potentially be thrown into a trade as well, although I expect they'll stick it out with him. He's an older player, he was 23 his rookie year, and so, you might not think that he has as high of a ceiling. How much better is he going to get, especially after he spent so long in college. But I do still think there are some improvements for him to make. He was still sort of a raw prospect, even at his older age coming into the NBA. He clearly had a lot to learn about the NBA game. And so I think that he could potentially make some improvements in his second season. I would hold on to him just to see what he can do. Even if he didn't look great his rookie year, I think there is still some upside with Obi Toppin that I would be willing to wait on that one. And then Reggie Bullock and Taj Gibson, both are free agents. Gibson, I would not worry about him. He's 36. I know Tom Thibodeau likes him because they have the history together, of course, where he played on the Timberwolves and the Bulls when Thibodeau was the coach. And so there's the reason that he was brought in. But I would let him walk, or maybe he retires this offseason. He's getting older, so we'll see on him. And then Bullock is also another guy who it was a solid veteran shooter for them this year. I think that a lot of contenders out there are going to have interest. And the Knicks, it's the similar thing with Noel, Burks, and Rose, where the Knicks are going to have the option to pay him more than any other team could, but they're not going to want to pay everybody, and obviously you don't want to overpay a role player like this. So we will see what they do with him, but he's another one that if they lose him, then they'll feel the effects of that. It's not the end of the world, but you don't want to lose a guy like Reggie Bullock, even if you want to re-sign him to try to trade him at some point down the line. But I do, you can never have too much shooting on an NBA team. So whether that's with the Knicks or somewhere else, I think his value is pretty high around the league right now. And I would not be shocked if they lost him this time. But again, should be a higher priority for them to bring back. Luka Vildoza has not appeared in an NBA game. He is non-guaranteed for 3 more seasons. I will hold off a take on him because I have obviously not seen him play in an NBA game. Overseas prospect. I view this one similarly to how I view the Gabriel Deck thing with OKC. It's a multi-year non-guaranteed contract where if he's good, then that's great. You get a nice player on a cheap contract, and if he's not, then you can just cut him for no big deal. So because it's non-guaranteed, so it's a low risk, high reward move. I don't mind it at all, and we'll see if he's any good when he plays next season. But he has not played yet, so I have no idea. Emmanuel Quickley, great rookie season out of him. He's looking like a draft steal. 6-man scorer, has one of the best floaters maybe in the history of the NBA. His floater is crazy accurate, and he really reminds of a guy like Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford, Jordan Clarkson, those 6-man heater scorers off the bench. And I think he's kind of already played himself into a long-term role on this team, so good for him. Mitchell Robinson, they have a team option on him for next year. I fully expect them to pick that up. He was injured a lot this past year, so it kind of put a damper on the whole Mitchell Robinson hype train because he had a great first 2 seasons in the NBA. Then this past year, he dealt with a lot of injury, didn't play too much. So hopefully he's able to get healthy and comes back. But he is actually unrestricted after that coming season. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because he's a second-round pick or something weird. But typically after your rookie deal, you're going to be
restricted free agent, but Mitchell Robinson is not, at least according to SpotTrack.com, which is where I typically look for this information. So it looks like he's not going to be restricted, and I believe that means that he is not extension eligible this offseason either. So we'll see with him, but that could be a guy that you maybe lose in free agency next summer if you don't save cap space for him. Depends on how much they value him. Maybe he's potentially a trade guy then if they feel like they don't want to pay him in free agency. We will see on Mitchell Robinson, but that is something to watch this year. And then Norvel Pell is non-guaranteed for next year and then a team option for the following. He was brought in, played for a couple of different teams this season, and a lot of people seem to like him. He's 28 years old, kind of in his athletic prime right now, and seems like he does belong in the NBA. Multiple teams have given him a shot, but he's never really been able to stick anywhere. Hopefully for him, it is with New York, and they've given him the opportunity to play himself into a longer-term contract. And then Theo Pinson on the two-way deal. He has the best job in the league, where he just gets to be a hype man in New York and doesn't have to play. So good for him. He's a nice option to have on the two-way contract. Honestly, I think that he can step in and play if you need him to, and he won't be horrible. But he just doesn't really get much of a chance, and that's fine. That's kind of what you need for your two-way guys anyway. As far as the draft goes, the Knicks have the 19th and the 21st pick in the first round, so 2 first-round picks. One of them is from the Dallas Mavericks in the Kristaps Porzingis trade, so a couple of options for them there, whether you want to trade up or potentially trade them for a veteran-type player who's making money because they can just absorb a contract into their cap space would potentially be an option for them. They also have a couple second-round picks, number 32 at the top of the second round, as well as number 58 near the very end of the draft. So a couple of options for them to potentially trade up in the order, select somebody. They don't necessarily need to go for fit or anything like that. I think they could really use anybody at any position. They don't have anybody, eating up a ton of minutes at any specific spot. So maybe somebody who, a more a high upside prospect, a guy who might need a couple developmental years. I think they can afford to wait a couple of seasons because they already are pretty good right now, and they've got a nice rotation. So I don't think they necessarily need to draft a contributor right away, although they can if they want to, right? We will see on that, but a couple of picks in order for them to work with here to potentially make a splash in the draft. I like the spot that they're in. 19 and 21, it might not seem like those are nice picks because they're kind of outside of the lottery, but in my opinion, this year's draft is a very deep draft class, and so they're going to be able to get their hands on a nice prospect at any point in the first round. So having 2 shots at that is pretty nice to have. And then as far as free agency goes, they've got a ton of cap space. Like I said, they can potentially trade for a guy into the space if another team doesn't want a bigger contract, or they can be like a third team kind of taking an unwanted contract onto the books, whether that's in exchange for draft picks or if you just want the player, if you don't have anybody else who wants to sign. So a couple of options for the New York Knicks there as well in order, in the trade department. And then you can just sign a guy like Kyle Lowry if he wants to come. DeMar DeRozan's also a great option. So I think, you can go out there and offer some contracts and see who wants to come, but I think they're in a good position in order to add some talent this offseason, whether that's the draft or free agency. A lot of options at their disposal. So in conclusion, it's finally a good time to be a Knicks fan. It's been a very, very long time since they've had any sort of hope or semblance of relevance. I mean, even with Carmelo Anthony, they were always good and they made the playoffs a couple of times, but there was never really any, supreme upside or really hope at becoming a really, really good basketball team. I think that right now is, the first time in a very long time that Knicks fans can look at the state of the roster and the state of the league and really feel like they have a shot to put together a special team within a couple of years. They've got, some decent young talent. Julius Randle has played himself into all-star status. Ton of cap space to potentially bring in somebody this offseason, and if they don't, use it all up this offseason, if they're smart about it, they can just reuse it next year when there's a lot more better free agents, So it's a good time to be a Knicks fan, and that's exciting for the league and for the team because in general, it's just more fun when the Knicks are good. I think everybody agrees on that, and it's finally, things are coming back around for them, which is nice. But I think that's about all I have on the New York Knicks. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the New York Knicks, their state as a franchise, who are they going to bring in free agency, who is a draft target for them. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But with all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.